how would you describe your style? Like, where did it come from? How did it originate? What did you do to develop this particular, and how would you categorize it?
So I think that there's some necessary context. I grew up around professional writers and storytellers. My father is a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist. He worked at the Boston Globe. He ran the Spotlight team, which there was a movie made called Spotlight with Michael Keaton. That's like the type of investigative journalism he was doing. So, my dad is this very high-speed journalist. My mother is also a professional writer, radio host, when she was younger. Incredible writer. My older sister is a 2-time Pulitzer winner, also a journalist at the Boston Globe. And my younger sister is a scientist. She's about to defend her dissertation, get her PhD to be a bee scientist. So I say all that because I was not like a big time academic. I was like, barely scraping by and honestly did horrible as a student. And, but growing up, I was surrounded by people that were incredibly good writers and storytellers, and almost, unintentionally, I learned how to speak, I learned how to tell stories,
Just through osmosis,
Yeah,
and
really.
some genetic raw material as well, perhaps.
It's almost like, basically. And, so I think that is a big part of why I think I'm able to tell a story well, is just being around really good storytellers. But I think in terms of my specific style, which I would categorize as, not deception, but telling a story where I'm holding off details, not to make the story not accurate, but rather using perspectives, inhabiting certain perspectives in a story that allow you to effectively tell an angle of the story where you are knowingly omitting a portion of the story that's going to come in later that will actually answer questions the audience is going to have. It's like I'm setting you up for an incomplete story that I absolutely fill in every single gap, but in a way that's not like, and then I'm going to explain it to you. It happens where we've left all these holes and it gets filled in at the end for a big, powerful reveal.
Use the story that we just went through.
Sure.
Explain to me how you've constructed that.
Absolutely.
Tell me what's going on.
So it's really important to understand, if you're going to tell a really good story, that it has less to do with the story and much more to do with the delivery of the person telling it. Now, that's not entirely true, because there are some stories that are so outrageous they carry the day. But most of the time, if you're going to tell a story, it's your delivery that's going to have the biggest impact on the audience. And so for this, I'm actually telling that lamp story with only you in mind. I'm not thinking about anybody else here. I'm really just gauging your reaction to the story. And so as a storyteller, I'm constantly trying to size up how my audience is reacting to what I'm saying. But in terms of that specific story, I know that I'm building to a place where I'm going to tell you that everything that happened in the story didn't happen. That's going to be the reveal. But the best way to set that up is to not flag that there is anything unusual about the beginning of the story, because it wrecks the reveal. If there's any language whatsoever in the first 90% of that story that tips the audience that this might not really be happening, it wrecks the story.
What would be an example of that? He was in school and hit and fell on the floor.
No, it actually, it's devices that a lot of storytellers use that I think hurts their stories. For example, I could say, going back to the lamp story, he's first noticed the lamp, right? And so he sees a blurry lamp. And so Mitch, he sees the lamp, it's blurry, he can't make sense of it. But what he didn't know is this lamp was going to ruin his life.
Right. Yeah.
Now that's an overt example, but there are little things that people think are good transitions between the story, like leading the audience to get ready, something big's going to happen. But if you telegraph too much early in the story that, get ready, something big's coming, the audience will just start guessing what it's going to be. And a lot of times it's fairly obvious that there's some element of the story that, is going to be revealed to be different in the end. So I would also say there's just nuance to it. When for example, I added something into that story, and it's part of the story, but I usually don't add it in, which is when Kayla came back in the house, when Mitch is now unresponsive and he's staring at the lamp and he's not even reacting to her, whereas the day before he was, I made a point of saying that Kayla ushered her kids out of the room. It's a small detail, but it gives it a level of reality that if you're the parent, you've come in and the parent's unresponsive, that little detail reminds you that this is a real human having a real interaction. If I don't include it, it likely has no impact. It doesn't matter that whether Kayla did or did not shoo her kids away because of this crisis, it doesn't really matter. But adding that in and delivering it not as I said it as if it absolutely happened. Like it's factual. She shooed the kids away and then she dealt with her husband. That's telling you, here it is. This is happening. Like engage with the story. This is really happening. But I'm doing it. I want it to feel as real as possible in the beginning so that the reveal actually has impact. And that's why I added little kind of almost they had family game nights, right? That they really did. But that's an important detail to the beginning of the story because I'm going to tell you it's all fake. So it's like layering in things that create authenticity in the beginning of that story is really important because the way that story often gets told is people will start with, here's a story about a guy who hit his head and he imagined his whole life and then it was taken away from him.
That's the way I did it.
He was in his house and he saw this lamp and it was blurry, but it turns out that was the beginning of this psychotic break he was having. But it's like the audience, that's the thing is when I'm telling a story, it's all about stick around because you're going to learn something that you were not expecting. There's going to be a plot twist. There's going to be a reveal. Instead of telling you that, the way I tell a story always includes a payoff. Always. I guarantee you can look at every single story I've ever put on the internet, ever, and there's a payoff at the end that is absolutely intentional. And so your audience begins to know that's what they get. Yeah, there's loads of details, and I'm not really sure where this is going, but if I stick around, something big is going to happen. And I did that without even telling you it. It's just the way I tell the story.
So are you adding stakes in the beginning as well? It seemed like that, as you're saying, they were in love and they do the family thing and it's the white picket fence and it's the American dream and they make sure that they look after each other with date night and this is the things that they do. That's adding a degree of stakes and I guess you're invested. Like you like these people.
Yeah.
Like you want to know what's going to happen to them.
Absolutely. I mean, that the deal is for this particular story, I need the first part of the story to just feel like it happened, which seems like a pretty easy charge. But when Mitch describes what happens, he does not spend a lot of time talking about whether or not, Kayla shooed the kids away when she walked in the house or whether they had game night. Those are little details that definitely happen. But for him, the story is the trauma itself, the fact that this didn't really happen. That's what he wants to talk about. Or that's the questions that he's answering are going to be about the trauma side. And so what I do is I recognize that in this case, if I'm going to tell it, I have to find all those small details to reassure the audience that, oh, this is real. This definitely happened. But I don't need to tell you that. I'm adding those little bits of just normal human life and thoughts that remind you without you even realizing it. Oh, this happened. That's not part of the story. Of course this happened. I'm going to see what happens next. But you don't realize that none of this happened, but I have to make it authentic.
Playing with the chronological order of events as well, I imagine, is something that you have to do. And also this purposeful omission of certain details.
Yeah, actually, a good example of that purposeful omission would be take a crime, a murder, let's say. There's a pretty good chance that the person who commits the murder is going to do something to get people to not think it's them. They're going to lie. They're going to misrepresent what happened. If people are asking questions, they're not going to be like, "Oh, I did it." Some people do, but a lot of people don't. They're going to try to protect themselves with lies. We'll tell a story where we will take the perspective of, let's say, the killer, but I haven't told you it's the killer. I'm just introducing this person into the story, and I'm using their perspective. And if their perspective includes absolute lies, but they're selling it as truth, and you don't know they're the killer, and you don't know they're lying, I can very honestly tell you something that this person said that was a lie, but I can tell it to you as truth because I'm inhabiting that person's perspective. So yes, it's a lie, but in the framework of that story, if I'm saying so-and-so said this thing and here's how they said it and to this person and here's the outcome of that what they said, it's not a lie. It winds up being a lie. But if I'm telling it from their perspective, it allows me to mislead you, but using real things that happened. That's a very powerful tool for the podcast, which is mostly true crime, where we're looking to find perspectives that allow us to basically lie, but using someone's real lie that was part of the story. If that makes sense.
In other news, this episode is brought to you by Element. You'll have heard me talking about Element an awful lot over the last few months, and that's because I start my day every single morning with it. You might not be tired, you might not need more caffeine, you might just be dehydrated. An Element contains a science-backed electrolyte ratio of sodium, potassium, and magnesium that helps to curb cravings, regulate your appetite, and improve your brain function. Stop having caffeine first thing in the morning. Your adenosine system that caffeine acts on isn't even active for the first 90 minutes of the day, but your adrenal system is, and salt acts on your adrenal system. Best of all, it tastes phenomenal. It's a beautiful, sweet, salty drink, and the orange version is my favorite. Also, there is a no BS, no questions asked refund policy, so you can buy it 100% risk-free, and if you do not like it for any reason, they will give you your money back, and you don't even need to return the box. That's how confident they are that you'll love it. You can get a free sample pack of all 8 flavors with your first box by going to the link in the show notes below, or heading to drinklmnt.com/modernwisdom. That's drinklmnt.com/modernwisdom.